I've always loved carnivals. The bright lights, the excited screams from the rides, the smell of fried foods wafting through the air. It's a sensory overload that I can't get enough of. But after what happened last night, I don't think I will ever look at a carnival the same way again. It was a warm summer evening when my best friend Jake and I decided to check out the traveling carnival that had set up shop on the outskirts of our small town. We'd been looking forward to it for weeks, saving up our money from our part-time jobs to splurge on rides, games, and enough junk food to make our stomachs hate us. As we approached the entrance, the familiar sights and sounds washed over us. The Ferris wheel loomed large against the dark night sky, its colorful lights blinking in a hypnotic pattern. Children ran by clutching stuffed animals won from various games, their faces sticky with cotton candy and caramel apples. The air was thick with the scent of popcorn and grilled meat. "Where to first?" Jake asked, his eyes wide with excitement. I grinned, already knowing the answer. Games first, then rides. Save the best for last. We made our way down to the midway, taking in the sights and sounds of various game booths. The carnies called out to us, trying to entice us to try our luck at winning oversized plush toys and cheap electronics. "Step right up, knock down the bottles, win a prize. Test your strength, ring the bell, impress your girl." We tried a few of the simpler games, winning a small stuffed dog for Jake's little sister and a plastic whistle that I knew I'd regret buying soon as I got it home. But as we neared the end of the row of games, one booth caught my eye. It was a bit different from the others, darker. The paint was chipped and faded, and the prizes hanging from the ceiling looked older, more worn. But what really drew me in was the game itself. It was a shooting gallery, with various targets moving back and forth on a conveyor belt. The booth operator was a tall, thin man with greased black hair and a patchy beard. His eyes were sunken and dark, and when he smiled, the smile didn't really reach his eyes. "Care to try your luck, boys?" he called out, his voice raspy and low. I hesitated for a moment, but Jake was already reaching for his wallet. "How much?" he asked. $5 for 5 shots, the man replied, his grin widening. "Hit all 5 targets, win the grand prize." He gestured to a sleek, new smartphone hanging from the top of the booth. Jake's eyes lit up. He'd been saving for a new phone for months. "You're on," he said, slapping a $5 bill on the counter. The operator handed Jake a rifle that looked far too realistic for a carnival game. As Jake took aim at the first target, I noticed something odd. The targets weren't the usual ducks or balloons you'd expect. Instead, they were small, detailed figurines of people in various poses. Jake fired his first shot. The crack of the rifle was louder than I expected, causing a few nearby patrons to jump. The bullet struck the first figurine dead center, shattering it into pieces. "Good shot," the operator said, his voice devoid of any real enthusiasm. "4 more to go." Jake took aim again, his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth to concentrate. Another shot, another shattered figurine, and another, and another. By the time Jake was lining up his final shot, a small crowd had gathered around us. The operator's eyes darted nervously from Jake to the crowd and back again. Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Jake squeezed the trigger one last time. The final figurine exploded in a shower of ceramic shards. The crowd erupted in cheers, but the operator's face had gone pale. "I did it!" Jake whooped, turning to high-five me. "Fork over that phone, mister." The operator's lips thinned into a tight line. "Sorry, kid. No prize for you." The crowd's cheers died down, replaced by confused murmurs. Jake's face fell. "What? But I hit all the targets." "Game was rigged," the operator said flatly. "Nobody wins. House always wins. Now scram." I felt a surge of anger on behalf of my friend. "That's not fair," I protested. "We all saw him hit every target." The operator's eyes flashed dangerously. "Life ain't fair, kid. Now beat it before I call security." Jake's hands clenched into fists at his side. "No way. I won fair and square. Give me that prize or give me my money back." For a moment, I thought the operator might back down, but then he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen here, you little shit. You didn't win anything. You want to know why? Because this game isn't about winning. It's about something else entirely. Now get your friend and get the hell out of here before things get ugly." I tugged on Jake's arm, suddenly very aware of how isolated we were at the end of the midway. "Come on, man. It's not worth it. Let's just go." But Jake yanked his arm away, his face flush with anger. "No, I'm not letting this scumbag rip me off." The operator's eyes narrowed. "Last chance, kid. Walk away now." Jake reached across the counter, grabbing the phone, hanging just out of reach. "Give me what I won." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The operator's hands disappeared beneath the counter, and when it reappeared, it was holding a very real and very deadly-looking gun. "I warned you," he snarled, leveling the weapon at Jake's chest. Time seemed to freeze. The sound of the carnival faded away, replaced by the thundering of my own heartbeat in my ears. I saw Jake's eyes widen in shock and fear, saw his mouth open to form words that never came. And then the world exploded into chaos. The gun went off with a deafening crack. The muzzle flashed momentarily, blinding me. Jake stumbled backwards, a red stain blossoming on his t-shirt. The crowd scattered, screams filling the air as people ran in every direction. I caught Jake as he fell, lowering him gently to the ground. His eyes were wide and unfocused. His breathing was rapid and shallow. Jake, stay with me," I pleaded, pressing my hands against the wound in his futile attempt to stop the bleeding. The operator vaulted over the counter, his eyes wide with panic. Shit, he muttered, pacing back and forth. "This wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to go this far." I looked up at him, fury and disbelief, warring for dominance. "What the hell is wrong with you? He's just a kid." The man ran a shaking hand through his greasy hair. "You don't understand. None of this was real. It wasn't supposed to be real." Before I could respond, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the chaos. The operator's head snapped up. Fear etched across his features. Without another word, he turned and ran, disappearing into the panicked crowd. I turned my attention back to Jake, who was growing paler by the second. "Hold on, buddy," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Help is coming. Just hold on." The next few hours passed in a blur. Paramedics arrived, whisking Jake away in an ambulance. Police swarmed the area, taking statements and searching for the shooter. I found myself sitting in the back of a police cruiser, trying to make sense of what had happened as I answered the detective's questions. "Are you sure it was the booth operator who fired the shot?" the detectives asked, for what felt like the 100th time. I nodded, my voice hoarse from repeating the story. "Yeah, I'm sure. He pulled the gun from under the counter and just shot Jake." The detective scribbled something in his notebook. "Can you describe this man?" I closed my eyes, trying to recall every detail. Tall, thin, greasy black hair, patchy beard, sunken eyes. He looked, I don't know, desperate, like he hadn't slept in days. The detective nodded, a grim expression on his face. "We've had reports of similar incidents at carnivals across the state. The game operator who takes things too far when someone wins. But this is the first time it's escalated to actual violence." "What do you mean, similar incidents?" The detective hesitated, as if debating how much to tell me. Finally, he sighed. "There's been a string of complaints about a particular game booth. Always a shooting gallery. Always with those creepy figurine targets. People say they win fair and square, but the operator refuses to give out the prize. Some have reported feeling threatened, but no one's ever actually been hurt before tonight." My mind reeled, trying to process this information. But why? Why go to all the trouble just to rip people off? The detective shook his head. "We're not sure, but based on what we've found so far, we don't think it's about the money or the prizes at all." A cold knot of dread formed in the pit of my stomach. What do you think it's all about then? The detective's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of something. Fear? Uncertainty? Whatever it was, it passed across his face. We think the game might be some kind of a test, or initiation. Initiation into what? I asked. Though I wasn't sure, I wanted to know the answer. We're not entirely sure, the detective admitted, but we found connections between the operators of those booths and various extremist groups, anti-government, militias, doomsday cults, that sort of thing. I felt sick. So what? They're using carnival games to recruit people? The detective nodded slowly. That's our working theory. The game is designed to be unwinnable. They're looking for people who refuse to back down, who are willing to fight for what they believe they're owed. People who might be susceptible to their ideologies. I thought about the operator's words. This game isn't about winning, it's about something else entirely. A shudder ran through me as the implications sank in. But Jake won, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He beat the game. The detective's expression softened. And that's probably why things escalated the way they did. Your friend didn't fit the profile they were looking for. He was just a kid who was good at carnival games. I felt the fresh wave of anger and grief wash over me. So they shot him? Just because he won a rigged game? We don't think that was the plan, the detective said. Based on witness statements and what we know about previous incidences, it seems like the operator panicked. He probably wasn't expecting anyone to actually win, and he certainly was not expecting your friend to push back so hard when he refused to give up the prize. I slumped back in my seat, feeling drained and overwhelmed. So what happens now? We'll keep investigating, the detective assured me. We've got officers combing the carnival grounds and interviewing all the employees. We've also put out an APB on the shooter. With any luck, we'll have him in custody soon. I nodded numbly, too exhausted to say anything more. The detective seemed to sense this, patting me gently on the shoulder. You've been through a lot tonight, son. Why don't you let one of our officers drive you home? We'll be in touch if we need any more information. As I climbed out of the police cruiser and into the waiting patrol car, I caught one last glimpse of the carnival. The lights seemed dimmer now, the cheerful music discordant and eerie. Yellow police tape cordoned off the area where Jake had fallen, and I recalled how quickly the night of fun had turned into a nightmare. The drive home was silent, my mind replaying the events of the evening on an endless loop. I couldn't shake the images of Jake's face in that final moment. The shock, the fear, the disbelief that something was so trivial could turn so deadly. When I finally crawled into bed in the early hours of the morning, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the muzzle flash of the gun, heard the crack of the shot that had changed everything, and underneath it all, a question kept nagging at me. What if Jake had not won? What if he had missed every one of those targets? Would the operator have tried to recruit him instead of shooting him? Would Jake have been drawn into whatever dark world lay behind that seemingly innocent carnival game? The thought made me shudder. As the first rays of light began to peek through my curtains, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jake's mom. With shaking hands, I opened it, both dreading and hoping for good news. Jake's out of surgery. Doctors say he's stable. Thank you for being there for him. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding. Relief washed over me in waves. Jake was alive. He was going to be okay. But as I lay there watching the sun slowly rise on a world that seemed fundamentally changed, I knew that okay was a relative term. Jake might recover from his physical wounds, but the scars left by that night would run much deeper for both of us. The carnival would move on, as it always did. But it would leave behind more than just flattened grass and discarded ticket stubs. It would leave behind questions about the dark undercurrents running beneath the surface of something so seemingly innocent, about the lengths people will go to pursue their twisted ideologies, about how quickly the familiar can become alien and threatening. In the days and weeks that followed, life took on a surreal quality. Jake's recovery was slow but steady, and I visited him in the hospital every day. We talked about everything and nothing, carefully dancing around the elephant in the room. the night that had changed everything. The police investigation continued, but progress was frustratingly slow. The carnival had packed up and moved on the very night of the shooting, leaving behind very little evidence. The other employees claimed to know nothing about the shooting gallery operator. Instead, he had been hired locally and had only worked there for a few days. But even as the trail grew cold, the ripple effects of that night continued to spread. Local news outlets picked up the story, running sensationalized headlines about Carnival of Death and Midway Mayhem. Parents kept their children from school, afraid some nebulous threat that seemed to lurk from every corner. And through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface of something larger and more sinister. It was about a month after the incident when detectives who had interviewed me that night showed up at my door. His face was grim, and I knew instantly that whatever news he brought was not good. "We've connected your case to several other cases across the country," he said without preamble. "Same MO, a shooting gallery with those creepy figurines, an operator who refuses to give out prizes, and in a few cases, threats of violence when people push back. Have there been more incidents? Like what happened to Jake?" The detective's expression tightened. "Two that we know of. A woman in Ohio and a man in Florida. Both shot after winning the game and demanding their prize." "Did they survive?" I asked, dreading the answer. He shook his head slowly. "I'm afraid not." I sank down into the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "So it's not just a local thing. It's what? Some kind of nationwide conspiracy?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," the detective said, taking a seat across from me. "We've got the FBI involved. They're looking into possible connections to extremist groups like we discussed before." I nodded, remembering our conversation in the police cruiser. "Have you found any?" "Some," he admitted, "but it's complicated. These groups, they're not like traditional gangs or terrorist cells. They're decentralized, operating in small, independent units. Makes them hard to track and hard to infiltrate." "But what's the point?" I asked, frustration creeping in my voice. "Why use carnival games as some kind of, recruitment tool?" The detective leaned forward, his voice low and serious. "Think about it. Carnivals travel all over the country. They attract people from all walks of life. It's the perfect cover for finding potential recruits. People who are dissatisfied, who feel like the world owes them something. The game is designed to bring out those feelings, to identify people who might be susceptible to extremist ideologies." I thought back to the night, to the anger and frustration I'd felt when the operator refused to give Jake his prize. How much stronger would those feelings have been if I had been the one playing, if I'd been someone who already felt wronged by the world? "So what happens now?" I asked, feeling suddenly very small in the face of something so vast and insidious. The detective sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "We keep investigating. We try to stay one step ahead of them. And we hope that by bringing this to light, we can warn people to be cautious." As he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. And I was right. Over the next few months, Jake's recovery continued. Physical therapy helped him regain strength in his chest and arms, but the psychological scars ran deeper. He jumped at loud noises, avoided crowds, and flatly refused to go anywhere near a carnival or fair. I wasn't much better off. My nights were plagued by nightmares of gunshots and shattered figurines. During the day, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see that greasy-haired operator lurking in the shadows. It was during this time that I started doing my own research. I spent hours online scouring news sites and message boards for any mention of similar incidents. Most of what I found was conspiracy theories or urban legends, but every now and then I'd come across something that rang true. A local news story about a carnival shooting, a first-hand account of a rigged game that turned threatening. I started compiling a database, noting patterns and connections. The same type of games, the same description of operators, the same escalation when someone won or pushed back too hard. It was like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, but one where the full picture was too terrifying to contemplate. About 6 months after the shooting, I received an anonymous email. The sender claimed to be a former carnival worker who had witnessed similar incidents. They provided details that matched what I knew, along with new information about the groups behind the game. According to the email, these weren't just isolated extremist groups. They were part of a larger network, one that used the carnival circuit as a cover for a wide range of illegal activities. Recruitment, yes, but also money laundering, drug trafficking, and worse. The email ended with a warning. They know people are onto them. They're changing tactics, so be careful. I debated whether to take this information to the police, but something held me back. How could I be sure this wasn't a trap? What if the email itself was part of their game? In the end, I decided to continue my investigation quietly. I created an anonymous blog where I shared my findings, careful to present everything as theories rather than facts. To my surprise, the blog gained a following. People from all over the country started reaching out, sharing their own experiences and theories. It was through that blog that I connected with Sarah, a journalist who had been investigating similar incidents in the West Coast. We started collaborating, cross-referencing our information and filling it in each other's gaps. And as we dug deeper, a clearer picture began to emerge. The carnival games were just the tip of the iceberg. We uncovered links to corrupt officials who turned a blind eye to the carnival's activities, to shell companies that moved money across state lines, to training camps disguised as farmland in rural areas. But the more we uncovered, the more dangerous our work became. Sarah reported being followed on multiple occasions. My apartment was broken into, though nothing was taken. A clear message that they knew who I was and what I was doing. The final straw came almost a year after Jake's shooting. I received a package in the mail. No return address. Just my name scrawled in messy handwriting. Inside was a single carnival game figurine, identical to the one Jake had shot that night. The message was clear. They knew who I was, and they were watching. I called the detective immediately, my hands shaking as I explained about the figurine, the email, the break-in, everything I'd been holding back. To his credit, he listened without judgment, taking detailed notes and assuring me they would investigate. But as I hung up the phone, I knew it wasn't enough. People, whoever they are, had their tentacles everywhere. How could I be sure the police weren't compromised? How could I trust anyone? That night, I made a decision. I packed a bag with essentials, withdrew all of my cash that I could from my account, and I left town. I wrote a note for my parents telling them I loved them and not to worry. I sent an encrypted message to Sarah, warning her to be careful and to go dark if she hadn't heard from me in a week. As I drove out of town in a used car I'd bought with cash, I couldn't help but think back to that night at the carnival. How naive we'd been, thinking the biggest risk was losing a few dollars on a rigged game. We stumbled into something so much bigger and so much darker. But I also thought about Jake, about his stubbornness, his refusal to back down when he knew he was right. And I knew I couldn't give up. Whatever this was, whoever was behind it, they needed to be stopped. So here I am, on the road, chasing carnival lights across the country. I'm not sure what I'm looking for exactly. Evidence, allies, answers. But I know I can't stop until I find it. Because somewhere out there, another unsuspecting person is stepping up to a shooting gallery, taking aim at those eerie figurines. And I have to believe that by uncovering the truth, I can prevent what happened to Jake from happening to someone else. The carnival circuit is vast, and these people are clever. They adapt, they evolve, they disappear into the crowds, only to resurface somewhere else. But I'm learning their patterns, their tricks, and I'm not alone. There are others out there like me, piecing together the puzzle, shining a light into the shadows. It's a dangerous game we're playing, but it's one we have to win, because behind the bright lights and cheerful music, behind the cotton candy and carousel rides, there's a darkness spreading. And if we don't stop it, who will? As I drive into the night, following the distant glow of another carnival on the horizon, I can't help but feel a mix of fear and determination. I don't know where this road will lead me or where the dangers lie ahead, but I do know one thing. The next time I step up to a carnival game, I'll be ready. And this time, I intend to win. The open road stretches before me, a ribbon of possibility in the darkness. Each mile takes me further from the life I knew, but closer to the truth I seek. The carnival lights beckon, and as I drive towards them, I can't help but wonder, in this deadly game of cat and mouse, who is really the hunter and who is the hunted? Only time will tell. But one thing's for certain, this is one game I cannot afford to lose.